Hello there everyone, and welcome to the live reading of chapter 2 of Aldous Huxley's Perennial Philosophy, which is titled The Nature of the Ground. And so thanks for being here. If you're catching up, we're going to be working our way through all of the Perennial Philosophy, so you can go back and check out previous chapters or look in the playlist for all of the episodes, all of the chapters. Please be sure to subscribe and comment and say hi. And if you want to support me, you can do that in a number of ways. Find out in the description. But for now, I think we're just going to get right into the chapter. So let's go. The nature of the ground. Our starting point has been the psychological doctrine that art thou. The question that now quite naturally presents itself is a metaphysical one. What is the that to which the thou can discover itself to be akin? To this, the fully developed perennial philosophy has at all times and in all places given fundamentally the same answer. The divine ground of all existence is a spiritual absolute, ineffable in terms of discursive thought, but, in certain circumstances, susceptible of being directly experienced and realized by the human being. This absolute is the God without form of Hindu and Christian mystical phraseology. The last end of man, the ultimate reason for human existence, is unitive knowledge of the divine ground, the knowledge that can come only to those who are prepared to die to self, and so make room, as it were, for God. Out of any given generation of men and women, very few will achieve the final end of human existence, but the opportunity for coming to unitive knowledge will, in one way or another, continually be offered until all sentient beings realize who, in fact, they are. Hello, Joanne Bradley. Good evening. Lovely to see you. The absolute ground of all existence has a personal aspect. The activity of Brahman is Ishvara, and Ishvara is further manifested in the Hindu Trinity and, at a more distant remove, in the other deities or angels of the Indian pantheon. Analogously, for Christian mystics, the ineffable, attributeless Godhead is manifested in a trinity of persons, of whom it is possible to predicate such human attributes as goodness, wisdom, mercy, and love, but in a supereminent degree. Finally, there is an incarnation of God in the human being, who possesses the same qualities of character as the personal God, but who exhibits them under the limitations necessarily imposed by confinement within a material body born into the world at a given moment of time. Hello there, Brother Lee. Lovely to see you, just in time to explore the nature of the ground through the perspective of the perennial philosophy. For Christians there has been, and ex hypothesi can be, but one such divine incarnation. For Indians there can be and have been many. In Christendom as well as in the East, contemplatives who follow the path of devotion conceive of, and indeed directly perceive, the incarnation as a constantly renewed fact of experience. Christ is forever being begotten within the soul by the Father, and the play of Krishna is the pseudo-historical symbol of an everlasting truth of psychology and metaphysics, the fact that, in relation to God, the personal soul is always feminine and passive. Mahayana Buddhism teaches these same metaphysical doctrines in terms of the three bodies of Buddha, the absolute Dharmakaya, known also as the primordial Buddha, or mind, or the clear light of the void, the Shambhogakaya, corresponding to Ishvara, or the personal God of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and finally the Nirmanakaya, the material body in which the Logos is incarnated upon earth as a living historical Buddha. Among the Sufis, al-Haykh, the real seems to be thought of as an abyss. I'll start that again. Among the Sufis, al-Haq, the real, seems to be thought of as the abyss of Godhead underlying the personal Allah, while the Prophet is taken out of history and regarded as the incarnation of the Logos. Some idea of the inexhaustible richness of the divine nature can be obtained by analyzing word by word the invocation with which the Lord's Prayer begins. Our Father, who art in heaven. God is ours in the same intimate sense that our consciousness and life are ours, but as well as immanently ours, God is also transcendently the personal Father, who loves his creatures and to whom love and allegiance are owed by them in return. Our Father who art. When we come to consider the verb in isolation, we perceive that the immanent transcendent personal God is also the immanent transcendent one, the essence and principle of all existence. And finally, God's being is in heaven. The divine nature is other than and incommensurable with the nature of the creatures in whom God is immanent. That is why we can attain to the unitive knowledge of God only when we become in some measure God-like, only when we permit God's kingdom to come by making our own creaturely kingdom go. God may be worshipped and contemplated in any of his aspects, but to persist in worshipping only one aspect to the exclusion of all the rest is to run into grave spiritual peril. Thus, if we approach God with the preconceived idea that he is exclusively the personal, transcendental, all-powerful ruler of the world, we run the risk of becoming entangled in a religion of rites, propitiatory sacrifices, sometimes of the most horrible nature, and legalistic observances. Inevitably so, for if God is an unapproachable potentate out there, giving mysterious orders, this kind of religion is entirely appropriate to the cosmic situation. The best that can be said for ritualistic legalism is that it improves conduct. It does little, however, to alter character, and nothing of itself to modify consciousness. Things are a great deal better when the transcendent, omnipotent, personal God is regarded as also a loving Father. The sincere worship of such a God changes character as well as conduct, and does something to modify consciousness. But the complete transformation of consciousness, which is enlightenment, deliverance, salvation, comes only when God is thought of as the Perennial Philosophy affirms him to be, immanent as well as transcendent, suprapersonal as well as personal, and when religious practices are adapted to this conception. And again, this comes back to the Bhagavad Gita and the Gita philosophy. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is at once the Atman, and the Paramatman is at once, at once immanent as well as transcendent, suprapersonal as well as personal, the Paramatman as well as the Atman. When God is regarded as exclusively immanent, legalism and external practices are abandoned, and there is a concentration on the inner light. The dangers now are quietism and antinomianism. Oh my goodness, that's a long word. I'll try again. Antinomianism. Never heard that one. The dangers now are quietism and antinomianism. Okay. A partial modification of consciousness that is useless or even harmful, because it is not accompanied by the transformation of character, which is the necessary prerequisite of a total, complete, and spiritually fruitful transformation of consciousness. Very true. Finally, it is possible to think of God as an exclusively suprapersonal being. For many persons, this conception is too philosophical to provide an adequate motive for doing anything practical about their beliefs. Hence, for them, it is of no value. It would be a mistake, of course, to suppose that people who worship one aspect of God to the exclusion of all the rest must inevitably run into the different kinds of trouble described above. If they are not too stubborn in their ready-made beliefs, if they submit with docility to what happens to them in the process of worshipping the God, who is both immanent and transcendent, personal and more than personal, may reveal himself to them in his fullness. Nevertheless, the fact remains that it is easier for us to reach our goal if we are not handicapped by a set of erroneous or inadequate beliefs about the right way to get there and the nature of what we are looking for. What does what mean? That word, if you want to know, Joanne, as you're asking, it would be rude of me to ignore because I'm just as interested as you are, Joanne, to find out what that word means. So bear with me and let's find out. I was wondering what you meant. What does what mean? Antinomianism. And it will tell us how to pronounce it as well. Antinomianism. Theology. The belief that Christians, by virtue of divine grace, are freed not only from biblical law and church-prescribed behavioral norms, but also from all moral law. The belief that Christians, by virtue of divine grace, are freed not only from biblical law and church-prescribed behavioral norms, but also from all moral law. So I suppose that if you're a Christian, you're above all laws and prescriptions. So thanks for asking, Joanne. Finally, it is possible to think of God as an exclusively suprapersonal being. Oh no, I turned back, didn't I? So yeah, this is why I enjoy the perennial philosophy and also theurgy. There's a lot of similarities to theurgy. Hello Google, nice to see you, good evening. And when I've spoken to religious people before, and you know, we're having our Peter Lee's just shared a good comment. The first noble conduct, whilst you understand yourself as a self, then perfect conduct when that is transcended. And yes, once you realize that you're one and the same with the Param Atman, then yeah. But yeah, I like to think the theurgist could worship any god, you know. Krishna one day, Christ the next, Brahman, Vishnu, and then like sort of and not atheistic, but then can worship the Buddha through the Buddhist beliefs. And you know, I think there's just a lot to be said of perennialism, so hence why we're working our way through it. So now we come to several quotes. So the first quote is from St. Bernard, quote, "Who is God? I can think of no better answer than He who is. Nothing is more appropriate to the eternity which God is. If you call God good or great or blessed or wise or anything else of this sort, it is included in these words, namely, He is. God is good." That's St. Bernard. Next, from Shankara, quote, "The purpose of all words is to words. Get that right. The purpose of all words is to illustrate the meaning of an object. When they are heard, they should enable the hearer to understand this meaning, and this according to the four categories of substance, of activity, of quality, and of relationship. For example, cow and horse belong to the category of substance. He cooks or he prays belongs to the category of activity. White and black belong to the category of quality. Having money or possessing cows belongs to the category of relationship. Now, there is no class of substance to which the Brahman belongs, no common genus. It cannot therefore be denoted by words which, like being in the ordinary sense, signify a category of things, nor can it be denoted by quality, for it is without qualities, nor yet by activity, because it is without activity, at rest without parts or activity, according to the Scriptures. At rest without parts or activity, according to the Scriptures. Neither can it be denoted by relationship, for it is without a second, and is not the object of anything but its own self. Therefore it cannot be defined by word or idea, as the Scriptures says, it is the one before whom words recoil." Shankara. You're very welcome, Joanne Bradley, but this is the perennial philosophy. So God, the nature of the ground, is just just a part of the perennial philosophy. So if you carry on the journey, we'll learn a lot more about life and our relationship with God and each other. So the next quote. It was from the nameless that heaven and earth sprang. The named is but the mother that rears the 10,000 creatures, each after its kind. Truly, only he that rids himself for ever of desire can see the secret essences. He that has never rid himself of desire can see only the outcomes. That's a quote from Lao Tzu. Next quote. One of the greatest favors bestowed on the soul transiently in this life is to enable it to see so distinctly and to feel so profoundly that it cannot comprehend God at all. These souls are herein somewhat like the saints in heaven, where they who know him most perfectly perceive most clearly that he is infinitely incomprehensible. For those who have the less clear vision do not perceive so clearly as do these others how greatly he transcends their vision. End quote. And that's from St. John of the Cross. Another quote. Quote, when I came out of the Godhead into multiplicity, then all things proclaimed, there is a God, the personal creator. Now this cannot make me blessed, for hereby I realize myself as creature. But in the breaking through I am more than all creatures. I am neither God nor creature. I am that which I was and shall remain, now and for evermore. There I receive a thrust which carries me above all angels. By this thrust I become so rich that God is not sufficient for me, in so far as he is only God in his divine works. For in thus breaking through I perceive what God and I are in common. There I am what I was, there I neither increase or decrease, for there I am the immovable which moves all things. Here man has won again what he is eternally and ever shall be. Here God is received into the soul. And that's a quote from Meister Eckhart. And another quote from Meister Eckhart, quote, the Godhead gave all things up to God. The Godhead is poor, naked and empty as though it were not. It has not, wills not, wants not, works not, gets not. It is God who has the treasure and the bribe in him, and the bride in him. The Godhead is as void as though it were not. End quote. And now back to Huxley. We can understand something of what lies beyond our experience by considering analogous cases lying within our experience. Thus, the relations subsisting between the world and God and between God and the Godhead seem to be analogous in some measure at least to those that hold between the body with its environment and the psyche, and between the psyche and the spirit. In the light of what we know about the second and what we know is not, unfortunately, very much, we may be able to form some not too hopelessly inadequate notions about the first. Mind affects its body in 4 ways, subconsciously through that unbelievably subtle physiological intelligence which Drake hypostatized under the name of the entelechy, consciously by deliberate acts of will, subconsciously again by the reaction upon the physical organism of emotional states having nothing to do with the organs or processes reacted upon, and either consciously or subconsciously in certain supernormal manifestations. And when we get into Gurdjieff's In Search of the Miraculous, there's a lot of talk about, how our mind and emotions and our body acts upon us and causes us to act. So, if you're interested in that stuff, Ouspensky and Gurdjieff will clear that up very much. Outside the body, matter can be influenced by the mind in 2 ways. First, by means of the body, and second, by a supernormal process recently studied under laboratory conditions and described as the PK effect. Similarly, the mind can establish relations with other minds either indirectly by willing its body to undertake symbolic activities such as speech or writing, or supernormally by the direct approach of mind reading, telepathy, and extrasensory perception. What do you make of that, hey? Mind reading, telepathy, and extrasensory perception. Let us now consider these relationships a little more closely. In some fields, the physiological intelligence works on its own initiative, as when it directs the never-ceasing process of breathing, say, or assimilation. In others, it acts at the behest of the conscious mind, as when we will to accomplish some action, but do not and cannot will the muscular, glandular, nervous, and vascular means to the desired end. The apparently simple act of mimicry well illustrates the extraordinary nature of the feats performed by the physiological intelligence. When a parrot, making use, let us remember, of the beak, tongue, and throat of a bird, imitates the sounds produced by the lips, teeth, palate, and vocal cords of a man articulating words, what precisely happens? Responding in some as yet entirely uncomprehended way to the conscious mind's desire to imitate some remembered or immediately perceived event, the physiological intelligence sets in motion large numbers of muscles, coordinating their efforts with such exquisite skill that the result is a more or less perfect copy of the original. Working on its own level, the conscious mind, not merely of a parrot, but of the most highly gifted of human beings, would find itself completely baffled by a problem of comparable complexity. As an example of the third way in which our minds affect matter, we may cite the all too familiar phenomenon of nervous indigestion. In certain persons, symptoms of dyspepsia make their appearance when the conscious mind is troubled by such negative emotions as fear, envy, anger, or hatred. These emotions are directed towards events or persons in the outer environment, but in some way or other they adversely affect the physiological intelligence, and this derangement results, among other things, in nervous indigestion. From tuberculosis and gastric ulcer to heart disease and even dental caries, numerous physical ailments have been found to be closely correlated with certain undesirable states of the conscious mind. Conversely, every physician knows that a calm and cheerful patient is much more likely to recover than one who is agitated and depressed. So that's a very interesting paragraph there that, if you're interested, you can Google and look more into, because since this was published by Huxley in 1945, many scientific investigations have been done into this fact, the nervous indigestion, and the fact that if you're stressed, anxious, worried, then it can affect your indigestion and also your physiology, your body, how you react to the world, your emotions. So that's why it's very important to take time and effort to work on your mental health, to improve it, to make it better, so that you can live your life without nervous indigestion, as Huxley puts it here. Finally, we come to such occurrences as faith healing and levitation. What do you make of that? Occurrences supernormally strange, but nevertheless attested by masses of evidence, which it is hard to discount completely. And an interesting start to this, faith healing and levitation. So if you are a Christian person, you'll believe in faith healing, because in the Bible, Jesus does a lot of that on his travels. He heals people. So Christians believe in faith healing, but also levitation. I mean, it's just, I think it's a matter of how closed or open your mind is. If you and talk to someone, that's right, Joanne, yes. If you're suffering from nervous indigestion or any of those things, stress, anxiety, depression, you're right there, Joanne. Talking to someone is, there's a saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. So by sharing it with someone you trust and love, then in a sense they take half of your problem for you, and it gets much easier. But anyway, back to faith healing and levitation. Precisely how faith cures diseases, whether at Lourdes or in the hypnotist's consulting room, or how St. Joseph of Cupertino was able to ignore the laws of gravitation, we do not know. But let us remember that we are no less ignorant of the way in which minds and bodies are related in the most ordinary of everyday activities. In the same way, we are unable to form any idea of the modus operandi of what Professor Rhine has called the PK effect. Nevertheless, the fact that the fall of dice can be influenced by the mental states of certain individuals seems now to have been established beyond the possibility of doubt. And if the PK effect can be demonstrated in the laboratory and measured by statistical methods, then obviously the intrinsic credibility of the scattered anecdotal evidence for the direct influence of mind upon matter, not merely within the body but outside in the external world, is thereby notably increased. The same is true of extrasensory perception. Apparent examples of it are constantly turning up in ordinary life, but science is almost impotent to cope with the particular case, the isolated instant. Promoting their methodological ineptitude to the rank of a criterion of truth, dogmatic scientists have often branded everything beyond the pale of their limited competence as unreal and even impossible. But when tests for ESP can be repeated under standardized conditions, the subject comes under the jurisdiction of the law of probabilities and achieves, in the teeth of what passionate opposition, a measure of scientific respectability. And I've got a good book by Dean Radin, I think, True Magic, which I'll be sharing soon in some books about magic. And also Russell Brand talks about, if you're interested in that, how the mind can affect and impact the rolling of the dices, the PK effect, what Huxley calls it. There's a great experiment, I think, if you just type into Google meditation experiment that reduced crime, I think there's a great study of transcendental meditators, I think, or some form of meditation, and they got together regularly and meditated together, and the crime rate in the area dropped significantly, like significantly enough that it made a difference, and they could register the difference, before and after. So yeah, all of this stuff is just so interesting for me, and it's why I love books like this, because when I first read it, every page you're getting like something that you could go away and investigate and look into and learn more about. Such, very baldly and briefly, are the most important things we know about mind in regard to its capacity to influence matter. From this modest knowledge about ourselves, what are we entitled to conclude in regard to the divine object of our nearly total ignorance? First, as to creation, if a human mind can directly influence matter, not merely within, but even outside its body, then a divine mind, immanent in the universe or transcendent to it, may be presumed to be capable of imposing forms upon a pre-existing chaos of formless matter, or even perhaps of thinking substance as well as forms into existence. In many philosophies they speak of the creation as the mind of God, or divine mind. So that's what Huxley's talking about there. He even says, then a divine mind. Once created or divinely informed, the universe has to be sustained. The necessity for a continuous recreation of the world becomes manifest, according to Descartes, when we consider the nature of time or the duration of things, for this is of such a kind that its parts are not mutually dependent and never coexistent, and accordingly, from the fact that we are now, it does not necessarily follow that we shall be a moment afterwards, unless some cause, viz., that which first produced us, shall, as it were, continually reproduce us, that is, conserve us. End quote. Here we seem to have something analogous on the cosmic level to that physiological intelligence which, in men and the lower animals, unsleepingly performs the task of seeing that bodies have as they should. Indeed, the physiological intelligence may plausibly be regarded as a special aspect of the general recreating logos. In Chinese phraseology, it is the Tao, as it manifests itself on the level of living bodies. The bodies of human beings are affected by the good or bad states of their minds. Analogously, the existence at the heart of things of a divine serenity and goodwill may be regarded as one of the reasons why the world's sickness, though chronic, has not proved fatal. And if, in the psychic universe, there should be other and more than human consciousnesses obsessed by thoughts of evil and egotism and rebellion, this would account, perhaps, for some of the quite extravagant and improbable wickedness of human behavior. The acts willed by our minds are accomplished either through the instrumentality of the physiological intelligence and the body, or, very exceptionally, and to a limited extent, by direct supernormal means of the PK variety. Analogously, the physical situations willed by divine providence may be arranged by the perpetually creating mind that sustains the universe, in which case providence will appear to do its work by wholly natural means, or else, very exceptionally, the divine mind may act directly on the universe from the outside, as it were, in which case the workings of providence and the gifts of grace will appear to be miraculous. Similarly, the divine mind may choose to communicate with finite minds, either by manipulating the world of men and things in ways which the particular mind to be reached at that moment will find meaningful, or else there may be direct communication by something resembling thought transference. Hello, Morgan. Sorry, I'm just going to get rid of these comment spammers. Yeah, hey, Morgan, what's Pet Cemetery like? Is it really scary? I think I'd like to read a Stephen King for next Halloween. I'm thinking maybe It, because that's a famous one, isn't it? And hello, King Arjun. Good evening and welcome. I hope you're doing well. So yeah, that was a pretty intense paragraph, wasn't it? That the mind of God, divine mind, can contact and communicate with us. And yeah, I suppose if you follow your feelings or follow the signs, I think it's James Redfield's Celestine Prophecy, he talks about synchronicities, and following and looking for these synchronicities, we can almost see a sign and recognize it and follow it. Okay, thanks Morgan, I'll look into it. In Eckhart's phrase, God, the creator and perpetual recreator of the world, quote, becomes and disbecomes. In other words, he is, to some extent at least, in time. A temporal God might have the nature of the traditional Hebrew God of the Old Testament, or he might be a limited deity of the kind described by certain philosophical theologians of the present century, or alternatively, he might be an emergent God, starting unspiritually at Alpha and becoming gradually more divine as the aeons rolled on towards some hypothetical Omega. So that's an interesting point of view that Huxley's saying there. He's almost saying that maybe God evolved it might be an emergent God, starting less spiritually at Alpha and then becoming his divine and God as we would know it when he comes to Omega and works his way through the alphabet. And it's like COVID, isn't it? We're up to Omicron. Hopefully it's the last one, but we've been through all of it. Excuse me. Why the movement should be towards more and better rather than less and worse, upwards rather than downwards, or in undulations, onwards rather than round and round, one really doesn't know. There seems to be no reason why a God who is exclusively temporal, a God who merely becomes and is ungrounded in eternity, should not be as completely at the mercy of time as is the individual mind apart from the spirit. A God who becomes is a God who also disbecomes, and it is the disbecoming which may ultimately prevail, so that the last state of emergent deity may be worse than the first. The ground in which we could have a Stephen King month for Halloween, guys. Let me know what you think about that. Although I'll be going to be very scared. But yeah, I think that might be a good idea, guys. Morgan. What do you reckon? Stephen King month for Halloween. The ground in which the multifarious and time-bound psyche is rooted is a simple, timeless awareness. By making ourselves pure in heart and poor in spirit, we can discover and be identified with this awareness. In the spirit we not only have, but are, the unitive knowledge of the divine ground. Analogously, God in time is grounded in the eternal now of the modeless Godhead. It is in the Godhead that things, lives, and minds have their being. It is through God that they have their becoming, a becoming whose goal and purpose is to return to the eternity of the ground. A quote. Meanwhile, I beseech you by the eternal and imperishable truth and by my soul, consider, grasp the unheard of. God and Godhead are as distinct as heaven and earth. Heaven stands 1,000 miles above the earth, and even so the Godhead is above God. God becomes and disbecomes. Whoever understands this preaching, I wish him well. But even if nobody had been here, I must still have preached to this poor box. End quote. And that's Meister Eckhart. Like St. Augustine, Eckhart was to some extent the victim of his own literary talents. The style c'est l'homme, no doubt, but the converse is also partly true. L'homme c'est le style. Some French there, I don't understand. Because we have a gift for writing in a certain way, we find ourselves in some sort becoming our way of writing. We mould ourselves in the likeness of our particular brand of eloquence. Eckhart was one of the inventors of German prose, and he was tempted by his newfound mastery of forceful expression to commit himself to extreme positions, to be doctrinally the image of his powerful and over-emphatic sentences. Okay, Leanne, noted, duly noted, everyone. October is Stephen King month, perfect. A statement like the foregoing would lead one to believe that he despised what the Vedantists called the lower knowledge of Brahman, not as the absolute ground of all things, but as the personal God. In reality, he, like the Vedantists, accepts the lower knowledge as genuine knowledge and regards devotion to the personal God as the best preparation for the unitive knowledge of the Godhead. Another point to remember is that the attributeless Godhead of Vedanta, of Mahayana Buddhism, of Christian and Sufi mysticism, is the ground of all the qualities possessed by the personal God and the Incarnation. God is not good. I am good. I'll say that again. Okay. Oh dear, that's never good seeing your mum similarity to a Stephen King character. I'll read that quote again. God is not good, I am good, says Eckhart in his violent and excessive way. What he really meant was, I am just humanly good. God is supereminently good. The Godhead is, and his isness, Istigkeit, in Eckhart's German, contains goodness, love, wisdom, and all the rest in their essence and principle. In consequence, the Godhead is never for the exponent of the perennial philosophy the mere absolute or academic metaphysics, but something more purely perfect, more reverently to be adored than even the personal God or his human incarnation, a being towards whom it is possible to feel the most intense devotion, and in relation to whom it is necessary, if one is to come to that unitive knowledge which is man's final end, to practice a discipline more arduous and unremitting than any imposed by ecclesiastical authority. Now we come to some more quotes. Quote from Ruysbroeck. There is a distinction and differentiation according to our reason between God and the Godhead, between action and rest. The fruitful nature of the persons ever worketh in a living differentiation, but the simple being of God, according to the nature thereof, is an eternal rest of God and of all created things. End quote. And another quote from Ruysbroeck, don't know how you pronounce it properly. Quote, in the reality unitively known by the mystic, we can speak no more of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, nor of any creature, but only one being, which is the very substance of the divine persons. There were we all one before our creation, for this is our super essence. There the Godhead is in simple essence, without activity. End quote. And another quote, the holy light of faith is so pure that, compared with it, particular lights are but impurities, and even ideas of the saints, of the Blessed Virgin, and the sight of Jesus Christ in his humanity are impediments in the way of the sight of God in his purity. End quote. And that's J.J. Ollier. Coming as it does from a devout Catholic of the Counter-Reformation, this statement may seem somewhat startling, but we must remember that Ollier, who was a man of saintly life and one of the most influential religious teachers of the 17th century, is speaking here about a state of consciousness to which few people ever come. To those on the ordinary levels of being, he recommends other modes of knowledge. One of his penitents, for example, was advised to read, as a corrective to St. John of the Cross and other exponents of pure mystical theology, St. Gertrude's revelations of the incarnate and even physiological aspects of the deity. In Ollier's opinion, as in that of most directors of souls, whether Catholic or Indian, it was mere folly to recommend the worship of God without form to persons who are in a condition to understand only the personal and the incarnate aspects of the divine ground. This is a perfectly sensible attitude, and we are justified in adopting a policy in accordance with it, provided always that we clearly remember that its adoption may be attended by certain spiritual dangers and disadvantages. The nature of these dangers and disadvantages will be illustrated and discussed in another section. For the present, it will suffice to quote the warning words of Philo. Quote, he who thinks that God has any quality and is not the one, injures not God, but himself. End quote. And this is again another aspect of the Bhagavad Gita, the personal and impersonal, or how you should worship. See it as Krishna, with all Krishna's attributes, or as Brahman, the unmanifest, without attribute. So it's lovely to see the community going on there in the chats. I do often glance over, and it's great to see you all supporting each other and chatting. So lovely. Another quote here. Thou must love God Thou must love God as not God, not spirit, not person, not image, but as he is, a sheer, pure, absolute one, sundered from all two-ness, and in whom we must eternally sink from nothingness to nothingness. End quote. And that's Meister Eckhart. What Eckhart describes as the pure one, the absolute not God, in whom we must sink from nothingness to nothingness, is called in Mahayana Buddhism the clear light of the void. What follows is part of a formula addressed by the Tibetan priest to a person in the act of death. So this following quote is from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which helps Tibetan Buddhists pass between their lives, pass through the bardo when they die. This prayer helps them. What follows is part of a formula addressed by the Tibetan priest to a person in the act of death. Quote, "A nobly born, O nobly born, the time has now come for thee to seek the path. Thy breathing is about to cease. In the past thy teacher hath set thee face to face with the clear light, and now thou art to experience it in its reality in the bardo state," in brackets, the intermediate state, immediately following death, in which the soul is judged, or rather judges itself by choosing, in accord with the character formed during its life on earth, what sort of an afterlife it shall have, close brackets. In this bardo state all things are like the cloudless sky, and the naked, immaculate intellect is like unto a translucent void without circumference or centre. At this moment know thou thyself and abide in that state. I too, at this time, am setting thee face to face. End quote. And that's the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Going back further into the past, we find in one of the earliest Upanishads the classical description of the Absolute One as a super-essential no thing. And this is a quote from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Quote, "The significance of Brahman is expressed by neti neti, not so, not so. For beyond this, that you say it is not so, there is nothing further. Its name, however, is the reality of reality. That is to say, the senses are real and the Brahman is their reality." End quote. Back to Huxley. In other words, there is a hierarchy of the real. The manifold world of our everyday experience is real with a relative reality that is, on its own level, unquestionable. But this relative reality has its being within and because of the absolute reality which, on account of the incommensurable otherness of its eternal nature, we can never hope to describe, even though it is possible for us directly to apprehend it. The extract which follows next is of a great historical significance, since it was mainly through the mystical theology and the divine names of the 5th century author who wrote under the name of Dionysius the Areopagite that medieval Christendom established contact with Neoplatonism and thus, at several removes, with the metaphysical thought and discipline of India. In the 9th century, Scotus Erigena translated the two books into Latin, and from that time forth their influence upon the philosophical speculations and the religious life of the West was wide, deep, and beneficent. It was to the authority of the Areopagite that the Christian exponents of the perennial philosophy appealed whenever they were menaced, and they were always being menaced by those whose primary interest was in ritual, legalism, and ecclesiastical organization. And because Dionysius was mistakenly identified with St. Paul's first Athenian convert, his authority was regarded as all but apostolic. Therefore, according to the rules of the Catholic game, the appeal to it could not lightly be dismissed, even by those to whom the books meant less than nothing. In spite of their maddening and eccentricity, the men and women who followed the Dionysian path had to be tolerated, and once left free to produce the fruits of the Spirit, a number of them arrived at such a conspicuous degree of sanctity that it became impossible even for the heads of the Spanish Inquisition to condemn the tree from which such fruits had sprung. So guys, we're nearly finished chapter 2. We have a quote coming up now from Dionysius the Areopagite. I think that's how you pronounce it. And then a bit more from Huxley, and then we'll be finished. So if you've got any questions or anything you want to share, get that in the chat now, because yeah, we're nearly finished. So this is a quote from Dionysius the, I think it's pronounced Areopagite. Quote, The simple, absolute, and immutable mysteries of divine truth are hidden in the superluminous darkness of that silence which revealeth in secret. For this darkness, though of deepest obscurity, is yet radiantly clear, and, though beyond touch and sight, it more than fills our unseeing minds with splendours of transcendent beauty. We long exceedingly to dwell in this translucent darkness, and, through not seeing and not knowing, to see Him who is beyond both vision and knowledge, by the very fact of neither seeing Him nor knowing Him. For this is truly to see and to know, and through the abandonment of all things, to praise Him who is beyond and above all things. For this is not unlike the art of those who carve a lifelike image from stone, removing from around it all that impedes clear vision of the latent form, revealing its hidden beauties solely by taking away. For it is, as I believe, more fitting to praise Him by taking away by than ascription. For we ascribe attributes to Him when we start from universals and come down through the intermediate to the particulars. But here we take away all things from Him, going up from particulars to universals, that we may know openly the unknowable, which is hidden in and under all things that may be known. And we behold that darkness beyond being, concealed under all natural light. End quote. And that's from Dionysius the Areopagite, or Areopagite. The last bit's from Huxley on the nature of the ground. This is back to Huxley. The world, as it appears to common sense, consists of an indefinite number of successive and presumably casually connected events, involving an indefinite number of separate individual things, lives and thoughts, the whole constituting a presumably orderly cosmos. It is in order to describe, discuss, and manage this common sense universe that human languages have been developed. Pretty tasty paragraph there from Huxley. Whenever, for any reason, we wish to think of the world not as it appears to common sense, but as a continuum, we find that our traditional syntax and vocabulary are quite inadequate. Mathematicians have therefore been compelled to invent radically new symbol systems for this express purpose. But the divine ground of all existence is not merely a continuum, it is also out of time and different, not merely in degree, but in kind, from the worlds to which traditional language and the languages of mathematics are adequate. Hence, in all expositions of the perennial philosophy, the frequency of paradox, of verbal extravagance, sometimes even of seeming blasphemy. Nobody has yet invented a spiritual calculus in terms of which we may talk coherently about the divine ground and of the world conceived as its manifestation. For the present, therefore, we must be patient with the linguistic eccentricities of those who are compelled to describe one order of experience in terms of a symbol system whose relevance is to the facts of another and quite different order. So far, then, as a fully adequate expression of the perennial philosophy is concerned, there exists a problem in semantics that is finally insoluble. The fact is one which must be steadily borne in mind by all who read its formulations. Only in this way shall we be able to understand even remotely what is being talked about. Consider, for example, those negative definitions of the transcendent and immanent ground of being. In statements such as Eckhart's, God is equated with nothing, and in a certain sense the equation is exact, for God is certainly no thing. In the phrase used by Scotus Erigena, God is not a what, he is a that. In other words, the ground can be denoted as being there, but not defined as having qualities. This means that discursive knowledge about the ground is not merely, like all inferential knowledge, a thing at one remove, or even at several removes from the reality of immediate acquaintance. It is, and because of the very nature of our language and our standard patterns of thought, it must be paradoxical knowledge. Direct knowledge of the ground cannot be had except by union, and union can be achieved only by the annihilation of the self-regarding ego, which is the barrier separating the thou from the that. And that's the end of chapter 2. We'll have chapter 3. Chapter 3 won't be tomorrow. It'll be Thursday evening at 9 because I'm busy tomorrow evening. But Thursday evening at 9 we'll carry on with chapter 3. I should tell you what it is, shouldn't I? Personality, sanctity, and divine incarnation. It's a bit of a longer chapter, but it will promise to be very intense, just like all of Huxley's words are there. It's quite difficult language, and like I said, deep and profound truths about the perennial philosophy. So if you really want to grasp it, you might need to re-listen to it and maybe do a bit of Googling. But yes, if no one's got anything else to add, any questions about anything, really, doesn't have to be about the perennial philosophy. I see a lot of you guys getting to know each other in the comments. I've actually got a cup of tea this evening. Normally I'd have a coffee for the longer reads because I need some coffee to help me stay awake. But as it's just this is a short read for book club, isn't it? 56 minutes. That's a little one. So yeah, guys, if there's nothing else coming through in the chats, I'll wish you a great day tomorrow and enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll try my best, Joanne. Any questions, always feel free to ask and I'll try and answer them. And if I can't answer them, I'll fall back on trusty Google and see if Google can help, or dictionary.com with the here we go. Dictionary.com is what I use for the definitions if we don't know a word, and that was a very interesting word. So here we go. Google says, one brief query. Obviously, the term agnosticism was initially coined by Huxley. What do you consider this term to mean? I'm not sure if he did coin the term agnosticism. I think it's well, again, let me look at we'll have a look. Agnostic would be the term. It says here, let's see. Yeah, it comes from Greek. So let me read you the definitions. Agnostic, a person who holds that the existence of the ultimate cause as God and the essential nature of things are unknown and unknowable, or that human knowledge is limited to experience. 2. A person who denies or doubts the possibility of ultimate knowledge in some area of study. And 3. A person who holds neither of two opposing positions on a topic. So yeah, it's a pretty loaded phrase, but agnostic sort of holds that the existence of the ultimate cause, God, and the essential nature of things are unknown and unknowable, that human knowledge can't perceive God, so they're agnostic. And it comes from the Greek agnostos, not known, incapable of being known. Oh, it does, look. It was coined by T.H. Huxley, which is, I think, Aldous Huxley's uncle, I think. So, thanks for that question, agnostic, looking into that. And Joanna, I'll be honest with you, some of the time, I don't understand it all. I don't get everything from it, especially some of these quotes. Some of these quotes are deeply profound, and they come from, just like, if you remember, from the introduction. I think it's the introduction where Aldous Huxley talks about the different writings, the Shruti and the Smriti. So I think the Smriti is the higher, the inspired writings, and then the Smriti is sort of the commentaries and translations on the higher books. So you have the inspired books, and then you have the books that are written about the inspired books. And so I do understand most of it, but some of these profound quotes, it's almost like they're not meant to be read and understood in one reading. It's not like you just read it and you've got it, like let's just take one. Let's just take this one here to answer Joanne's question. Do I understand it all? I'm going to take this quote from Meister Eckhart. Thou must love God as not God, not spirit, not person, not image, but as he is, a sheer, pure, absolute one, sundered from all two-ness, and in whom we must eternally sink from nothingness to nothingness. So now, if you understand that, then you must be a saint or a mystic, because I don't really understand it. But it's sort of like I'm saying, it's designed to maybe write it out, to look at it all the time, to ponder it. In Zen, they talk about Zen koans. So famous ones. What's the sound of one hand clapping? That's a very famous Zen koan. And so again, do you understand that? I don't know, do you? Maybe you have, but I'd imagine you'd need to go away and contemplate the koan, contemplate the phrase. That's why I say go back and listen to it again if you really want to get it. And it's no problem, Google, ask her whatever you like. And Morgan says, I'm enjoying this without being religious. Do you think you need to be religious to enjoy this book to the full extent? I would say no, I don't think you do, because the Perennial Philosophy is sort of, I don't know if beyond religion is the right way to phrase it and say it, but the Perennial Philosophy, I think maybe it's fair to say, I don't know what Peter Lee thinks, let me know, but I think it does transcend religion because it encompasses all religions. And like I said, Morgan, when I've spoken before to religious people who are confined to their own religion, take a Christian or a Muslim, when we have our discussions, I can accept and understand everything that the Muslim believes, but I also am aware of the Christian perspective and the Jewish perspective and the Buddhist perspective and the Hare Krishna perspective. So in a sense, by understanding the Perennial Philosophy, you're going to understand a lot about many religions. So no, I don't think you need to be religious. And I suppose there's a good book, I've mentioned it often on the channel, Brian Murarescu's The Immortality Key. He says that many people in today's modern world are, SBNR, which extends out to SBNR means spiritual but not religious. So I think many people in the modern age, religious almost seems to be antiquated and old and doesn't offer nothing. So most people are spiritual but not religious. So they might be interested in something like Huxley's Perennial Philosophy or Houston Smith's Comparative Religion, where he compares all the religions, and it's similar to Aldous Huxley's Perennial Philosophy. But no, I don't think you need to be religious. But that being said, if one of the quotes really moves you, you're listening and you don't understand much and it's quite hard going, and then I read a quote and you feel drawn to it, you're moved by it, then maybe that's a sign that you need to look up that quote on Google, find the book it comes from and the tradition it comes from, and maybe that's your way to be interested in religion. I'm not preaching here. I don't preach here at Book Club. I just try and lay down the facts and the truths that I understand it. And then, you guys can do with it what you want. So, guys, thanks for these questions because it keeps us going a bit. And while you're all here, it's lovely to chat with you. So Joanne Bradley says, how do you feel about it? Like you don't know anyone else, but have had to change perception. Too sweet recently. So I think what you're saying there, Joanne, is that if you don't have anyone to speak to about it, and waking up or understanding some of these things, it's best to find a community, and it's more helpful if you have a community or a friend, someone to be accountable with and to explore these things with, and not to plug my own thing, but the Patreon book club community over there, you can have private messages and like constant contact. So if you're struggling with lack of community, or you don't have a community or people to share with, of course you can come to these live reads, and I'm seeing everyone's getting on lovely in the chat, which is wonderful to see. But the book club community, the link's in the description. Peter Lee says, make the worship of God as not an object of thought, as thinking begins and ends with the brain. So sorry Peter if I'm putting words in your mouth, but in a sense, worship of God is not a thought. You don't think worship. It's sort of an emotional thing. It transcends the mind. It's higher than the mind. And the mind, like Peter says there, it begins and ends. Thinking begins and ends with the brain, and worship of God is not an object of thought. So very well put there, Peter Lee. You can come again if you're going to be giving us some good quotes up to Huxley standard. I like it. You're welcome, Morgan. And Joanne, I mean, life circumstances. Life circumstances. Life is, our experience, isn't it? Life is everything that makes us up, from our past and our history to our present moment and situation, the life circumstance. But in a lot of these traditions, and especially in astrology, Vedic astrology, and also in many of the philosophies, they say you can't control what happens to you in life. You can't control your life circumstances, but you can control how you react to them. And it's like when Huxley was saying there, if you go back and listen to the part where he's talking about the I'm even going to have to look myself, about the indigestion, the nervous indigestion. He says there in that part, maybe I'll read it to you again if you want, because or maybe there's no need, you can go back. But if you're stressed and anxious and worried, then it has effect on your body and on your mind and on your emotions, which then obviously affects the world around you and the people and whoever you come into contact with. So I think it's important to be positive, to live in gratitude, and to really study the Perennial Philosophy and other inspirational books. There's many on the channel already that you can go and listen to be inspired, and come and listen to the live reads, and be part of this great community that we're growing. And you guys are all here really early, which is amazing and great to have you. And we've got a lot of books to read, so I'm looking forward to it. But it seems like the chat has calmed down, and it's been great to have you here, and I very much enjoyed, and I always do, maybe I should encourage it more and more, these questions and chats towards the end, because it really makes me think on my feet. And I love seeing you guys input and questions, and everyone helping everyone out. So guys, that's it for this evening. Join me on Thursday night at 9 for chapter 3, personality, sanctity, and divine incarnation. So that proves to be another powerful and deep and profound essay from Huxley, and I'm looking forward to that. And then we'll work our way through the books, and I've got some new books today. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but not next weekend, the weekend after, I'm going to do a I'll do a poll, and we'll get back to some of the more, story books. So, yeah, good night, Joanne. Google, you're very welcome, and I'm really glad that you're enjoying the Perennial Philosophy. So it's great to see you. And Peter Lee, thanks for making an appearance. I'd really love to see your name there, and maybe we can have a chat afterwards if you're available. But nice to see you, Brother Lee, and everyone else who commented. Morgan, Joanne, Google, Leanne McNeil, everyone, King Arjun. Try and get everyone. I think that's everyone. So thanks everyone for being here. Lovely to see you. Here we go. Peter's leaving us with some truth to end. To semi-quote Socrates, there is no worse situation than to be not able to calmly discuss and examine such as this. Very nice. Calmly discuss and examine. That's what we should all be doing. Keep the emotions out of it. And here we have Jennifer. We're just closing up, Jennifer. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it too, Leanne. Thanks, Google, Jennifer M. My children have been really enjoying your Roald Dahl book readings. Thank you so much. You're very welcome, Jennifer. I'm glad they enjoy it. It's my pleasure, and I hope it helps them to fall in love with books and reading, which is my goal of all of this. So, guys, good night, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you not tomorrow, Thursday night at 9 for chapter 3. All right, guys, take care. I'll see you soon. Bye, guys. Take it easy. See ya. Good night.